November 15th, 2001, dawned crisp and clear over the quiet streets of Provo, Utah. The city, known for its tree-lined avenues and close-knit neighborhoods, would soon be shaken by the disappearance of a young woman named Lauren Pierce. Lauren, 24 years old, worked at a local bookshop and had recently completed a graduate degree in education. Her family described her as bright, ambitious, and kind-hearted, always eager to help her community. On that morning, she left her apartment for her routine jog along the Provo River Trail, as she had done countless times before, but she never returned. Her friends initially assumed she had run late errands or taken a detour, but as hours passed, concern grew into fear. By evening, Lauren's roommate called her parents, Alan and Miriam Pierce, worried that Lauren had not come home. The Pierces immediately drove to the trail and the surrounding areas, calling her name into the fading light. Panic began to set in as they realized something was seriously wrong. The Provo Police Department was contacted, and officers arrived to search the trail, nearby parks, and parking lots. Volunteers joined in, scanning wooded areas and underpasses where Lauren might have taken shelter. Yet, as night fell, no trace of her was found. The disappearance of a young woman in such a calm city sent ripples of unease through the community. Residents who once walked their dogs or jogged freely along the river trail now kept a watchful eye on their surroundings. The initial investigation focused on immediate family, friends, and acquaintances. Detectives interviewed Lauren's colleagues, classmates, and neighbors, piecing together her last known activities. Lauren had spent the previous evening with friends at a small gathering, returning home around 11 p.m., and had mentioned plans for a morning run. Surveillance from local businesses revealed her walking route, but the footage ended before she disappeared. Detectives collected statements, looking for inconsistencies, but everyone described her as cheerful and prepared for her day. There were no known threats, no stalkers, and no reason anyone could point to for harm. As the days stretched into weeks, the search expanded. Helicopters scanned the surrounding mountains. Divers combed the Provo River, and officers canvassed the city door to door. Despite their efforts, Lauren's trail seemed to vanish. Completely, the first major clue arrived almost 2 weeks later, when a hiker discovered Lauren's backpack, hidden in a thicket near the foothills of the Was Range. Inside were her wallet, keys, and a water bottle, all untouched. There was no sign of struggle, no fingerprints other than Lauren's, and no immediate indication of who might have taken her. Investigators began to suspect that Lauren had encountered someone she knew, someone she trusted enough to let approach her. The location of the backpack suggested that whoever was involved had knowledge of the area, and had chosen a secluded spot to avoid detection. For the Pierce family, the discovery of the backpack was both a relief and a torment. It confirmed Lauren's disappearance was real, but it offered no answers about her fate. Detectives followed up with every person Lauren had known. One early suspect, a former boyfriend named Jeremy Collins, was interviewed extensively. He cooperated fully, providing alibis verified by multiple witnesses. The next lead came from a co-worker who mentioned a man seen jogging near the trail the morning Lauren vanished. Witness descriptions were vaguer, tall man, approximately 30, wearing a dark hoodie, but no one could provide a name. Tips flowed in from the community, some helpful, many false. The police followed each lead, driving into surrounding towns, checking local motels, and cross-referencing databases for missing persons. Yet, month after month, no concrete progress emerged. By 2002, the case had gone cold. Lauren's parents remained vigilant, holding vigils, distributing flyers, and engaging with local media to keep the search alive. The Pierce family endured the quiet horror of not knowing whether Lauren was alive or dead. The city that once felt safe now seemed layered with suspicion, every shadow and stranger a possible threat. The detectives who had started the case were reassigned or retired, leaving the evidence boxed and stored, waiting for technology or fresh eyes to reopen the mystery. For the next decade, Lauren's disappearance remained one of Provo's most haunting, unsolved cases. In 2015, the Utah State Bureau of Investigation established a cold case unit, motivated by advances in DNA analysis and growing national attention on unsolved crimes. 2 detectives, Rachel Munro and Tom Higgins, were assigned to re-examine Lauren's file. They began by reviewing every detail collected in 2001, witness statements, the backpack, Lauren's personal effects, and neighborhood interviews. They noted that while much of the evidence seemed minimal at first glance, modern DNA techniques offered possibilities that had not existed when the case first began. Hair and fiber samples collected from Lauren's backpack, once considered inconclusive, were re-examined using more sophisticated methods. Investigators hoped that technological improvements would finally illuminate the shadows of the case. By 2016, a breakthrough arrived. DNA extracted from fibers in Lauren's backpack produced a partial profile that had never been uploaded to national databases at the time of her disappearance. Detectives began cross-referencing this new evidence with every known offender in Utah, focusing on men with access to outdoor areas, familiarity with the trail system, and histories of violent or sexual offenses. It was meticulous work, examining decades-old records, retracing interviews, and recontacting witnesses who had long ago assumed the case was unsolvable. The persistence paid off. The DNA matched a man named Eric Sanford, who had lived in Provo in 2001 and had been arrested for minor assaults shortly after Lauren's disappearance. Sanford had since moved to another state and maintained a clean record outwardly, but his past contained subtle indicators of violent behavior. Detectives obtained a warrant to arrest him and bring him back to Utah for questioning. Sanford's interrogation began cautiously. Initially, he denied any knowledge of Lauren Pierce. He claimed he did not remember the events of 2001 clearly, attributing his silence to the passage of time. But when detectives presented the DNA match, his composure faltered. After hours of questioning, he admitted to being near the trail the day Lauren vanished, but he minimized his involvement. Detectives pressed further, carefully building a timeline and confronting him with inconsistencies in his story. Eventually, Sanford confessed to the crime in detail, explaining that a confrontation had escalated, leading to Lauren's murder. He revealed where her remains were hidden, and search teams quickly located them in a secluded area near the mountains. The confirmation brought both closure and renewed grief to the Pierce family, as the reality of Lauren's death was finally undeniable. The community of Provo was shocked by the revelation. Many residents had walked the trail, unaware that a murderer had been operating so close to their homes for decades. Local newspapers ran stories detailing the confession, the DNA breakthrough, and the long struggle of the Pierce family. For Helen and Robert Pierce, the resolution brought a complex mix of emotions: relief that the truth was finally known, sorrow for the years lost, and gratitude toward the detectives and witnesses who never gave up. It also renewed conversations about safety, community awareness, and the importance of supporting families of missing persons. The revelation of Eric Sanford's involvement sent shockwaves through Provo, detectives Rachel Munro and Tom Higgins continued piecing together the final timeline of Lauren Pierce's last day. In revisiting witness statements, they discovered subtle details that had been overlooked during the original investigation. One neighbor who had seen Lauren jogging that morning recalled a man in a dark hoodie lingering near the parking lot of the trailhead, someone who seemed to be watching the path rather than running. At the time, it had been dismissed as a passerby, but now it took on ominous significance. Detectives also learned that Sanford had worked part-time at a nearby construction site, giving him familiarity with the local trails and secluded areas. He knew where he could operate without being seen, which explained why Lauren had vanished without leaving a trace. The Pierce family, after 16 years of agonizing uncertainty, were invited to a secure briefing at the cold case unit. Lauren's parents, Alan and Miriam, were initially wary of being exposed to renewed pain, but they understood the importance of knowing the truth. Detectives walked them through the evidence: the DNA match, the confession, and the location of Lauren's remains. Alan, usually composed, struggled to hold back tears, while Miriam wept openly, relief mingled with decades of sorrow. Finally, there was a sense of closure, though it came with the heavy weight of grief that no confession could erase. The detectives assured the family that the investigation would continue to gather every piece of evidence needed for a solid prosecution. Meanwhile, investigators traveled to Sanford's current residence in Idaho, where they conducted a thorough search of his property. They seized personal items, electronic devices, and records of his movements. In 2001, detectives discovered correspondence indicating Sanford had obsessively tracked Lauren, even after her disappearance. He had written notes about her routine, her friends, and the paths she jogged daily. The obsessive behavior, hidden in the past, now revealed a chilling premeditation. Additional interviews with neighbors and former co-workers painted a consistent picture of Sanford as a man capable of manipulation and hidden violence, someone who had maintained a calm exterior while harboring dangerous tendencies. The confession also revealed the details of the crime itself. Sanford admitted that he had confronted Lauren on the trail, initially intending to scare her into following his instructions, but the confrontation escalated. A struggle ensued, and he strangled her in a moment of panic. Afterward, he carried her remains to a remote location near the base of the Wasatch Mountains. Detectives located the site exactly as Sanford described, and recovery teams carefully documented the evidence. The discovery confirmed the confession's accuracy and provided the forensic proof needed to build a compelling case. Each piece of evidence, matched with the DNA, strengthened the prosecutorial file, and every recovered item told a story of the final moments of Lauren's life. Community members were called upon to assist in locating potential witnesses who might have seen Sanford in 2001, people who had long ago dismissed odd behavior began to recall small details. A stranger lingering near the trail, someone asking unusual questions about residents, or unexplained visits to local shops. Each memory, though minor at the time, now became a critical thread in understanding Sanford's movements and mindset. Local media coverage helped spread awareness, prompting others to come forward with recollections that had never reached investigators. It was a reminder that even seemingly small observations can carry weight. When examined years later with renewed focus, the prosecution's team, led by Assistant District Attorney Laura Phillips, began preparing their case with meticulous care. They focused on the DNA evidence, the confession, Sanford's prior history, and the corroborating witness statements. Their goal was to present a clear, chronological narrative that demonstrated both motive and opportunity. The defense, aware of the DNA evidence, attempted to argue that the confession was coerced or unreliable. But investigators and the cold case unit had documented every step of the interrogation with thoroughness and transparency. Every interview was recorded, every statement logged, and every piece of evidence accounted for, leaving little room for doubt. As the trial date approached, Lauren's family prepared for a public hearing that would reopen old wounds. They received support from friends, community members, and advocacy groups for families of murder victims. Counselors were made available to help navigate the emotional strain of revisiting details of Lauren's disappearance. The community, having lived with the uncertainty for nearly 2 decades, also experienced a range of emotions: relief that the perpetrator was caught, sorrow for the life lost, and lingering fear that someone so close to the community had been capable of such violence. Public attention was intense, with local and state media covering each development. During the pre-trial hearings, evidence from 2001 was reintroduced to the court. Forensic experts explained the advances in DNA testing that had made the match possible, and testimony from detectives outlined the painstaking work of reopening a case that had gone cold. Witnesses who had once provided statements years earlier were brought back to recount what they remembered with the benefit of new context. The court was careful to ensure that the jury understood the reliability of each piece of evidence and the chain of custody that maintained the integrity of the materials. Every detail mattered, and the prosecution left nothing to chance. Sanford, in the weeks leading up to trial, maintained a defensive posture, often giving terse or evasive answers to attorneys. Psychological evaluations conducted by court-appointed professionals highlighted patterns of obsessive behavior, poor impulse control, and manipulative tendencies. These assessments reinforced the prosecution's narrative that Sanford had acted intentionally and with full knowledge of his actions. Investigators and experts collaborated closely to ensure that the evidence was presented in a clear, factual manner that the jury could comprehend. The preparation was exhaustive, and the stakes were high. When the trial finally began in late 2017, the courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, and family members. The atmosphere was tense, with every detail of the case scrutinized. Prosecutors presented the narrative chronologically, beginning with Lauren's last known movements, the initial search efforts, the discovery of her backpack, and the eventual DNA breakthrough. Detectives testified about the methods used to extract and match the DNA, the interviews with Sanford, and his confession. Each piece of evidence was placed in the context of the timeline, creating a compelling story of premeditated and deliberate action. Pamela Hayes, a close friend of Lauren, took the stand to describe Lauren's character and daily routine. Her testimony emphasized Lauren's independence, kindness, and routine habits, reinforcing that the young woman would not have wandered into danger without reason. Hayes also recounted small interactions with Sanford before 2001, recalling how his behavior had sometimes been intrusive or overly familiar, though she had never suspected the danger he posed. This personal testimony added a human dimension to the evidence, showing not only the mechanics of the crime, but the impact on Lauren as a real, living person with family and friends who loved her. The defense attempted to cast doubt, suggesting that the DNA evidence could have been contaminated and questioning the reliability of Sanford's confession given the passage of time. However, cross-examination of forensic experts dismantled these claims, demonstrating the strict protocols followed in handling the samples and documenting every step. The confession, recorded and corroborated by Sanford's knowledge of details only the perpetrator could know, remained a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Sanford's own testimony, which he gave after waiving his right to remain silent in certain proceedings, was rambling and inconsistent, further undermining any attempts at doubt. Community reaction to the trial was profound. People who had once walked the Provo River Trail without fear now reflected on the hidden dangers that had existed in plain sight. Local organizations initiated programs for public awareness about safety on trails and outdoor spaces, and support networks for families of missing persons grew stronger. For Alan and Miriam Pierce, the trial was both painful and cathartic. They finally had the truth, the evidence, and the legal confirmation that their daughter had not simply vanished, but had been taken by someone who had meticulously concealed his crime for nearly 16 years. Detectives Monroe and Higgins continued to provide detailed testimony, explaining how patience, persistence, and modern technology had combined to solve a case that had long been considered unsolvable. Their efforts were recognized not only locally but also by national law enforcement circles, highlighting the importance of revisiting cold cases with fresh eyes and new tools. The case became a model for other cold case units, demonstrating that even decades-old mysteries could be solved with determination and scientific advancement. The courtroom was silent as the final witnesses were heard and closing arguments began. Prosecutor Laura Phillips spoke with clarity and emotion, reminding the jury of the relentless search for truth that had spanned 16 years. She outlined the DNA evidence, the confession, and the corroborating witness statements, emphasizing that each element fit together with unyielding precision. Phillips urged the jury to remember Lauren as a real person whose life had been stolen, not just a case number or a cold file. She spoke of the impact on her family, the grief that had shadowed their lives for nearly 2 decades, and the necessity of justice for both Lauren and the community that had long lived under uncertainty. The courtroom was tense, and the Pierce family clung to each other, silently absorbing the weight of every word. The defense attorney countered, stressing Sanford's attempts to cooperate and the alleged gaps in the recollection of events. He argued that memories could be distorted over time and suggested that the confession, though detailed, might not be fully reliable after so many years. Yet, under cross-examination, Sanford himself faltered, offering inconsistent statements and contradicting his prior admissions. Forensic experts calmly explained that the DNA evidence had been meticulously preserved and analyzed according to stringent protocols. The jury could see the overwhelming weight of factual evidence versus speculation, and slowly the narrative of certainty built in favor of the prosecution. Outside the courtroom, the community watched developments closely. Local media outlets reported each testimony and procedural step, reminding the public that the crime had affected not just Lauren's family but the larger town. Friends who had lost hope in 2001 now followed each day of the trial with a mixture of anxiety and relief, sensing that a resolution was finally within reach. The trial also inspired conversations about safety in public spaces, community vigilance, and the role of law enforcement in protecting residents. School groups, outdoor clubs, and civic organizations began holding discussions, using Lauren's story as a poignant reminder of how important awareness and timely action could be in preventing tragedies. The jury deliberated for 3 days, reviewing evidence, testimony, and legal instructions. During this time, the Pierce family remained close-knit, finding solace in each other's presence and the support of close friends. Alan Pierce reflected quietly on the long years of uncertainty, the holidays spent in anxious waiting, and the birthdays marked by absence. Miriam Pierce often thought about the moment she had first heard of the DNA match. The sudden relief mingled with shock, and how surreal it felt that after so many years the truth had emerged. Both parents knew that even with a conviction, grief would linger. But the knowledge of justice provided a foundation to begin healing. Finally, the jury returned. Sanford sat expressionless as the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder and unlawful disposal of a body. Gasps filled the courtroom, and the Pierce family wept openly. Relief, sorrow, and a sense of justice intertwined as the enormity of the moment settled in. The sentencing phase followed, and Sanford was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The judge spoke of the years of suffering endured by Lauren's family and community, the calculated nature of Sanford's actions, and the importance of holding him accountable despite the passage of time. The courtroom, packed with reporters, law enforcement personnel, and members of the public, experienced a solemn acknowledgement of both the crime and the resolution of decades-long uncertainty. Detectives Monroe and Higgins, who had worked tirelessly to reopen and solve the case, felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had navigated lost files, outdated records, and skeptical witnesses to build a case strong enough to secure a conviction after 16 years. Their efforts highlighted the value of patience, diligence, and technological advancement in solving cold cases. They were interviewed by local media, emphasizing that no case should ever be considered truly unsolvable. Their work inspired other investigators nationwide to re-examine cold cases with renewed determination, demonstrating that justice could be achieved even after many years of inaction. The Pierce family slowly began the process of rebuilding their lives. They attended counseling sessions, engaged with support groups, and leaned on community networks for emotional reinforcement. For them, everyday routines were tinged with the memory of Lauren, yet each step forward brought a sense of resilience. Alan returned to his work as an accountant, but he often reflected on the importance of family and vigilance. Miriam, who had spent years volunteering at local youth programs, intensified her efforts to educate teenagers about safety and awareness. Both parents sought to honor Lauren's memory by ensuring that her story would serve as a lasting lesson to others. Lauren's friends and former classmates organized memorials and commemorative events in her honor. Local schools held assemblies discussing the importance of community, safety, and speaking up when something seems amiss. Outdoor trail clubs dedicated a section of the Provo River Trail to Lauren, installing a small plaque and benches where hikers could reflect on her life. These acts of remembrance provided tangible ways for the community to heal and to keep Lauren's memory alive in positive ways, ensuring that her story would not fade into obscurity. Sanford's incarceration had broader ramifications. Law enforcement agencies reviewed other cold cases to determine if any patterns matched his behavior, seeking to ensure that other victims would not be overlooked. Prosecutors and investigators conducted workshops on using DNA evidence in older cases, emphasizing the importance of preserving samples and maintaining accurate records. The Utah Department of Public Safety noted that advances in forensic technology, combined with persistent investigative work, were key factors in achieving justice in cases previously deemed unsolvable. This case became a model for integrating historical evidence with modern methods to resolve long-standing mysteries. As months passed, the Pierce family gradually found a new equilibrium. Though they would never forget Lauren, they began to experience moments of peace that had eluded them for 16 years. Friends and neighbors continued to check in, providing support and community connection. The emotional burden, while still present, became more manageable with the knowledge that the person responsible for Lauren's death had been held accountable. Their lives slowly resumed a semblance of normalcy, shaped by memory, grief, and the satisfaction of justice finally served. The community's collective consciousness shifted as well. Residents who had once felt a vague unease about strangers or unfamiliar figures in town realized the importance of vigilance and reporting suspicious activity. Neighborhood watch programs were strengthened, and local authorities encouraged open communication between citizens and law enforcement. Lauren's case became a catalyst for preventive measures, showing that tragedy could lead to lasting positive change when combined with awareness, collaboration, and persistence. In the end, the Utah 2001 cold case stood as a testament to patience, the power of forensic science, and the unyielding determination of those unwilling to let a crime remain unsolved. Lauren Pierce, though lost at a young age, became a symbol of resilience and justice, her story inspiring both families and investigators alike. The Pierce family, while forever changed, carried her memory forward with pride and determination, ensuring that the lessons learned from her life and tragic death would endure. Months after the verdict, Alan and Miriam Pierce met with local law enforcement to discuss establishing a scholarship in Lauren's name, dedicated to students pursuing criminal justice or forensic science. This initiative was a way to honor her memory constructively, creating a legacy from the tragedy. Community members rallied behind the idea, seeing it as a chance to transform grief into opportunity, ensuring that Lauren's story continued to impact lives positively. The scholarship became a symbol not only of remembrance, but also of the hope that others could contribute to solving crimes and supporting victims in the future. Detectives Monroe and Higgins continued their work, revisiting other cold cases in Utah with renewed vigor. They knew that, while justice in Lauren's case had been achieved, countless other families still awaited answers. Their experience with Lauren's case had reinforced the critical importance of diligence, meticulous evidence handling, and the integration of new technology with old records. They also emphasized the human element, listening to families, acknowledging community concerns, and treating every missing person case with respect and urgency. Regardless of how much time had passed, Lauren Pierce's story became part of local history, not as a tale of despair, but as an example of eventual justice, community resilience, and the tireless work of law enforcement. Each year, friends, neighbors, and family would gather at the memorial site along the Provo River Trail to remember her life, share stories, and reflect on the progress made since 2001. Her name, once associated with mystery and loss, became synonymous with courage, remembrance, and the enduring pursuit of justice. Even years later, visitors to the trail reported feeling a sense of calm and reflection at the memorial site. Hikers would pause to read the plaque, contemplate Lauren's life, and recognize the dedication of those who had ensured her case was never forgotten. The story of the Utah 2001 cold case stood as a powerful reminder that truth, persistence, and modern science could intersect to bring long-awaited closure, and that even in the darkest chapters, justice could eventually prevail.